Happy politics, and welcome to what is the second favorite podcast in my house. I'm sorry, my son's Pokemon unboxing videos on YouTube are a massive, massive favorite, so we'll have to settle for silver medal. This is BC Poly Hot Stove. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca, Maclean K, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
It's Jordan Bateman, VP Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. It's not a podcast. In our house, Jack, our 11-year-old, loves watching YouTube videos of guys playing The Show, MLB The Show, and he thinks this is this. I don't understand it, but anyways, yes, kids today. Golly.
Jordan, we every Tuesday you and I exchange a couple emails talking about what we're going to talk about in the show. The last email that you and I exchanged is completely out of date because the world has changed in the interim. We could probably, there's so much to get through today, so we'll try not to dwell too long on any one topic, but we can't ignore what just happened this morning. Two sort of out of nowhere announcements, which were treated as separate by the provincial government. First, post-secondary education returning back to in-campus setting in, a couple weeks, and masks will be mandatory there. Oh, wait, but there's more. Masks are now back everywhere, in indoor settings. Your grocery store, your pub, for me, the hallway of my condo. At least I think that wasn't mentioned in the announcement. There's a lot going on right now, and you and I were just talking off air. It's one thing for someone like me who's been working from home and is still wearing my mask to places like the grocery store. Mm-hmm. That's fine. For someone like you who is helping set policy in a workplace, the confusion coming out of today makes your life probably significantly more difficult. Am I wrong?
Well, no, you're exactly right. I mean, within seconds of the announcement at the press conference, we had emails and questions from staff. Do we have to mask here? Do we have to mask there? The number one thing, Dr. Bonnie, if you're listening to this show, first of all, God bless you for listening to the show. But more importantly, please, 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 when you make these pronouncements at the press conference, have the regulation, have the order written, and have it posted while you're unveiling it. Because it is incredibly nebulous, and so many times in the past year and a half, you have set people for a loop in a way that you don't mean to, but because you don't actually have the details spelled out until sometimes days later, it makes it very difficult for anyone to really kind of handle what's going on. So first of all, it seems like old news now, but yesterday you have the passport announcement. Mm-hmm. That sent a lot of people for a loop. You didn't really have the regulations written, and yet, you kind of mandated that even medical exemptions, like legit medical exemptions, that's not good enough. Okay, today it's this. I don't know why you couldn't have announced this mask mandate yesterday. Like, I don't understand what changed overnight. Maybe something did, maybe something didn't, I don't know. But again, you don't have any rules. So in the press conference, initially it's like all indoor spaces, and really just anywhere except home, essentially, you'd have to wear a mask. Yeah. But then it kind of comes out, well, no, indoor public spaces. Okay, well, I'm in an office that's locked down by key fob and we rarely have visitors. Are we a public space? And this is where you get into the kind of problem. So, our Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, God bless them, led by the great Carrie Vitale, watch us on Training Thursday on the ICBA Facebook page. She, sends an email like, so are we masking? And we need to inform staff. And we're like, well, I mean, right now we have optional masks. We don't think the regulation hasn't been posted. We don't think it's changed for offices, but maybe it has. So this is just, I feel like we're stuck in Groundhog Day, first of all, where we constantly add more layers or bring back layers of protection, as Adrian Dix likes to call it. But more importantly, I feel like we're in Groundhog Day where they are so piss poor at getting the paperwork and regulations out in a timely fashion. So, as a business, as an office, it's one layer of complexity. As a restaurant, it's a whole nother layer of complexity. Or, as a public space, as a movie theater, like those folks their heads must be spinning at, what is it that we have to do today? What is it we have to do tomorrow? Am I checking double vax cards now for staff, but we're not allowed to mandate vaccine? Like, it is very difficult from our point of view.
Yeah, I mean, and this, I think your point of view and where you're coming from is more important than the point I'm about to make, quite frankly. But from a media point of view, it is so much harder when government, and they do this from time to time, they will dump a lot of information on your lap with no heads up, no briefing beforehand. I shouldn't say no heads up, there was a media advisory, but no, hint that something substantial is coming down the pike. And so it is very, very difficult to be, reading all this material, and then you're hearing, the announcement, and there's surprises in there, and you're, oh wait, what's that? What's this? And then when the time comes for questions, you're kind of like, I don't really understand what you just announced. Yeah. Can you rephrase it more quickly and in a more Twitter friendly fashion? I mean, I'm exaggerating for a laugh here, but I mean it's not far off. I think Rob Shaw commented on the sort of overall offness of today's announcement, and it's not any one thing you can point a finger at and say, this they did wrong. It's just everything felt odd and reactive. Mm-hmm. And I mean, as more than one person pointed out, Dr. Bonnie Henry, I guess somewhat infamously, was at the BC Lions game on the weekend, sitting there without a mask. I was one of those who defended her, saying, her advice is you don't need it. So what is it you want from her? Mm-hmm. And then just days later, we're announcing there's going to be a mask mandate. That suggests to me that either this decision was made in the 48 hours or whatever it is between the Lions game and this morning, or I don't know. It's hard to say.
Speaking of the Lions thing, can we just put a moratorium on Dr. Bonnie victory laps / honors from organizations? I get it. There'll come a time when we can have all the well-meaning, and I think I've come from a comms marketing background, so, if we made her a ICBA life member, think of, we'd get, a 30-second media clip. But let's just pause that. This game is not over. If the book was writing, if the book she wrote was really about writing about the Super Bowl in the first quarter, now we're writing about, now we're honoring her in the third quarter, like giving her the MVP. Like, let's just wait and see, because I don't know, man. My feeling right now is there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction going on in Victoria where, Dr. Bonnie was a pretty noted slow to come to the masking side. Like that's true. It's pretty, she was one of the very last health officers in North America to mandate it. And now all of a sudden we're going back to it, but this is a day after we've already the double vax. And again, I just come to if you're trying to encourage people to get the vaccination, okay, having them realize that, okay, even if I get double vax and get to go to the Canucks game, I still have to wear a mask for every second I'm in there. That is not a great carrot for them.
It is difficult to tell, someone who is hesitant on, vaccines or just generally playing by the rules at all to say, trust the science, trust the advice, when said advice is sort of moving around in a sort of herky-jerky fashion. These people are watching. They see it. I was going to say they understand. They don't understand. But, they're observing that it seems to be going from here to there to everywhere. And so it's just tough. And I don't know. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Maybe they got some really scary news and modeling, and that's why this was a sudden shift. I don't know.
But I'm
not suggesting that's the case. Yeah, exactly. I think it would be actually more useful to say, listen, it looks bad. So we really need to be more careful.
Yeah, I know the school briefing was set for 9:30. Do the school briefing. Say, hey, I'm going to have more at 2 o'clock, and I want the media in this lockup at noon because there's something important that I want to talk about at 2. The whole province was shut down and wait. We'd be on pins and needles. And it would also have given them time to actually craft the friggin' regulation instead of just shooting from your lip at a press conference. It is so difficult to deal with this. And then we're back to the wavy line, right? So, Dr. Bonnie, you have mandated, that no one can enter a Canucks game or any other public space event unless they are double vaxxed. Are you going to insist that teachers be double vaxxed? No. Well, they should. I'm encouraging them to, but hold up. What is a more public space than that? A school. I do not understand that. And if you're scared of the BC Teachers Federation, fine. Say you're scared of the BC Teachers Federation. I bet you most people in the public and most parents will side with you on this.
Yeah.
But you're talking about putting maybe unvaxxed teachers, a small percentage of them, in rooms with kids under 12 who by definition can't be vaxxed. That doesn't seem like a dumb idea to anyone else. So this squiggly line is back. I'm going to a Canuck game where the vast majority of the crowd will be adults. The vast majority would have been double vaxxed even without the mandate. Heck of a lot safer there, I think, than in their poorly ventilated classroom with a bunch of 10-year-olds who haven't been vaxxed. Like,
not the schools, but that similar example came up yesterday when someone asked about, so you need a vaccination, double vax, to go to a restaurant as of whatever date it is, October 4th. But the server might not be, because there's no requirement that employers are going to have to can force, essentially. Yeah. Some will, put in some very unofficial pressure, I'm sure, but it's silly a little, don't you think? It's hard to criticize, because even Horgan yesterday said, look, there's going to be bumps. We're just sort of doing this because we've never done it before, and we won't get everything perfect, and we'll try and smooth it out as we go. Fair enough. But that to me seemed like a fairly obvious, so I need to get the passport, which I support, but the person bringing me my burger and fries, it may not be vaccinated, and I'm about to take off my mask because I'm going to eat. It just, there's some contradictions there, and some people will start to get frustrated.
Look, employers, this is another huge point of frustration for employers. I think a lot of employers are like ICBA, like us, who are kind of now watching the big banks, RBC, mandating that you have to be double vaxxed, and really kind of pushing, like, we're not going to provide you with other options. Like, working at home is no longer an option. You must be double vaxxed. You must come back to work. Our sense is that someone's going to get sued over this. Some workplace is going to get sued over this, probably. And there'll be human rights complaints. Like, government could go a long way by just coming out and saying, we're legislating this, and if courts overturn it, we will invoke the notwithstanding clause. Period. End of sentence. If you're going back, we want everyone back in offices or back at work, you must be double vaxxed to do so. And if you're not, the employer has the right to dismiss you. Okay, guess what would happen? Lots of people get double vaxxed. So,
you're right.
And if they came out and said, like, we understand the courts may overturn it, we will override the court.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, Doug Ford did it on a much less important issue. But, like,
accurate.
And I'm not saying, and I should point out, like, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that approach. However,
no,
I want clarity, like, give employers clarity. Like, okay, this is we're going to do it. Everyone must be double vaxxed, period.
Yeah, well, and I mean, why not? Why not have David Eby get up there and say, oh, we fully expect this will be challenged. But the hope is this, the process will play out long enough that once, whatever the final decision is, a year or so down the tunnel, this will all be moot anyway. Yeah. So, I mean, just be upfront about it.
Yeah, and the court should be aware that we will, use every tool in our toolbox, to use a saying, including invoking the notwithstanding clause, to make sure this happens.
I have heard that expression before.
Yes. Anyways, this is the problem for it's not just businesses, it's NGOs, it's everyone. You're just kind of being buffeted back and forth. Another example of this is of unclear rules. It's not a COVID example. It's September 30th, which was announced as a new holiday to remember for Truth and Reconciliation, to remember, like, the horrors that have been put upon Indigenous people. I think all of us are like, that is a wonderful thing to have a conversation about, start dealing with. The problem is the holiday has been mandated for basically public employees. The private sector has no direction or no sense as to, it doesn't apply to them. So, some are giving it off, some aren't. There's kind of pressure in some areas to keep going, and then there's not. Like, if you're going to do it, just mandate it. Like, it's a stat holiday, done. Don't do this, like, half pregnant thing. Like, either go all in or not. I've heard from some employers that they're actually going above and beyond. Like, okay, this is so important to us. And these are obviously agencies that work closely with Indigenous people, and so have seen firsthand probably more of the grieving that's gone on than a lot of other companies have, who may not have those same kind of interactions or relationships. They're saying, we're going to give employees who are Indigenous a second day off, because we believe that first day will be, first of all, we recognize how horrible the year has been for Indigenous people to deal with, and we think that first day, a lot of them will be busy with ceremonies and other things to remember, and we want to give them a second day off to deal, help cope with that emotionally. Interesting idea. I would challenge that. I would challenge those companies to maybe extend that to veterans as well on Remembrance Day. Like, okay, like, give a veteran a second day off because they go to Remembrance Day ceremonies. And certainly in a year where Afghanistan has become an issue, I've spoken with folk, some soldiers who serve there and have grievous second thoughts and doubts about what's happened. So anyways, it's like, so I think we all want to get there. Like, the positive intention is good, but, like, don't do these half-ass things. Like, don't half-ass two things. Full-ass one thing, as Ron Swanson once said on Parks and Rec. Like, just come right out and say, all right, double vax, period, at work, we're going to mandate it and we'll take our lumps in court. Masks everywhere or nowhere or whatever, we're going to take our lumps. This government seems, they're trying to be too cute by half sometimes, and I don't think it works.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about Dr. Henry at the Lions game, and I was going to use that as a seg to the next segment by calling it a political football, which is the George Massey Tunnel Replacement Project. I'm sorry, it was weak, but I couldn't help myself.
I'm just worried Jillian Stead is tuned out because she heard the word football and thought.
That's true. Well, I said political football. Okay, What's allowed, I think. Come back, Jillian. We're not there yet. Where was I going to say? The Massey Tunnel Replacement, we talked about it a little last week. Rob Shaw wrote about it for the Orca. There was one thing in that piece I think you wanted to address. It's a good piece, but we're not done talking about this issue for a long shot. I mean, this is going to be going on for the next, literally 10 years.
Yeah, so Rob's piece essentially has the theory that Horgan brought this out, the NDP brought this out in election time, federal election time, so that they could basically take any blame for delays and throw it on the federal government or whoever to fund it. The problem with that is, and this isn't Rob's fault, he doesn't live in the Lower Mainland, he's not dealing with the Massey maybe as intimately as, say, I am, as someone who had companies who lost contracts who were going to build it. The problem with that theory is this. Both Trudeau and Andrew Scheer, then Liberal, then CPC leader, came out in 2019 and said very clearly, a Conservative government, a Liberal government will fund our share of a Massey Tunnel replacement. You tell us what kind you want, we'll be there. We'll help fund it. Infrastructure is important, especially this one that serves the port. Again, before the piece was written, in 2021, Trudeau and this time Erin O'Toole came out with very sturdy looking, we want, the checkbook is ready. This is the kind of infrastructure we want to fund. A CPC government, a Liberal government, we will fund our share of this infrastructure. So, the piece, that part of the piece is just a little bit flawed in that it's not really political football. The political football is that, Horgan took so long to release the business plan because they kind of had to really finagle to get the tunnel to some sort of cost parity with the bridge by slicing and dicing important parts of it like rail, by shrinking it to a seemingly goofy size. That's really the political football, and I don't think Horgan gets off the hook for it because Conservative voters in the area and Liberal voters in the area both know, no, our government said they'd fund it, and Jagmeet's saying he'd fund it too. So it doesn't let them off the hook. So it was just one of those stories that I found interesting simply because kind of came from Victoria and someone who maybe hasn't for those of us who have to deal with the Massey Tunnel on a regular basis, this is a life and death issue that we know everything about. So it's, it's kind of like, it's not an esoteric topic for us. It's like I was stuck in this an hour last night kind of topic.
Fair enough. Let's use that as a bridge to, I did it again, to the federal election in general. Mm-hmm. I will be upfront with you and our listeners. You wanted to talk this morning about Justin Trudeau's announcement, I guess earlier this morning, about his $1.4 billion housing plan. I'm going to be totally upfront with you. I have not read that in detail yet. As previously discussed in this podcast, it's been quite a morning. And so I will leave you to walk us through what the Liberals thought was a very big announcement. And just because we've been so overwhelmed here in BC with our own domestic news, I haven't really seen much reaction to it yet.
Yeah, it's one of these classic political promises where you start to pull the thread and the sweater unravels really quick. So Trudeau came out, affordable housing, we're going to make housing more affordable, and we're going to do it by spending $1.4 billion on new homes. Then he tweets out, or someone tweets out from his account roughly the same time, we're going to spend $1.4 billion on new homes, renovating homes, and protecting rental homes. Whoa, hold up. So it's not $1.4 billion on new homes. It's $1.4 billion, and some of it's going to prevent evictions, I guess, and some of it's going to, I guess, buy old buildings, so there will be no net increase in rental housing. So that changes the tenor of that quite a bit, right? Okay, I don't really get it. Frankly, I've been sort of enjoying the commentary. I don't usually enjoy his commentary, but of a Justin Ling, for example, on the housing file, because he's everything that every party seems to propose is just going to make housing more expensive, like more unaffordable, more problematic. Like there's no sense, like was it Singh who said he's going to give $5,000 to renters or something like that, a $5,000 grant to renters? Well, guess what, landlords, increase your rent by $5,000. Like there's a direct line there. Like this is not rocket science. But my all-time favorite tweet on this is from Corey Hogan, host of The Strategist, who tweeted out a couple days ago, look, all I want is a government that will make the house I own worth more and make sure that there's lots of houses that are affordable for everyone else. And that's the classic thing, like tongue-in-cheek for Canadians, like the people who own houses or governments, parties, they want to protect home equity and make sure that's a big part of people's retirement portfolios, their personal wealth. And at the same time, they want to make housing cheaper. And those goals are completely counter to one another. And how do you actually get past that? The NDP, to their credit, are just like, screw it. We don't care about homeowners. We only care about renters.
They picked a side, in other words.
They picked a side. I think they've picked a smaller side, but when you look at where their support is age-wise and riding-wise, it makes sense to go with the renters. But for the parties like the Liberals and the Conservatives, and I would say the Bloc Québécois, who depend on some sort of suburban support, they can't do that.
No. And there are people watching and listening to this who are saying, well, damn it, we just have to separate. Housing should not be an investment. It should be a home. Well, that's easy to say. But I'm speaking for myself. I can't afford to own a home and invest separately. From the overwhelming majority of people in this country, buying a home is the biggest investment they will ever make. And there's nothing wrong with it because it's against the it's not against the rules. It's very much by the rules. And it's a good investment. It's a smart decision on their part. And so it would be cruel, quite frankly, to go to people who have, this is what they've planned their life and retirement and their children's future around. And all of a sudden, we're going to just find some way to hack off some of the value. That's also going to change a lot of lives. So, for me, my stance on the overall housing position has not really changed. It's, look, we got to build more, and the problem are the municipalities, the cities. Yes. That's where the backlog is, and there are other things at play. I'm not saying there's nothing else happening, but that is the biggest single contributor to this. Yeah, and a party needs to be able to say to the mayors and councils and all that, like, no, you can't say no more.
Yeah, and we know this because governments of completely different political stripes have come to this conclusion.
Yep.
Joey McPhail, noted NDPer, writes a report. The number one hurdle to affordable housing supply is ding, 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 cities and municipalities. Christy Clark commissioned a report. Guess what they found? The number one hurdle to affordable housing supply is ding, 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 cities and municipalities. And so you got to we talked about giving businesses cover for things like COVID. You got to give municipalities and mayors cover too, right? Like, this is a provincial goal. We are going to build X number of things, and municipalities do not have the right to say no except in very narrow circumstances. The default should be yes, not no.
Yeah.
And and if you do say no, there's going to be ramifications for you. Maybe we withdraw some investment in rapid transit. Maybe we're not so interested in putting in a BC housing stock there. Like, maybe we make your community, take away some provincial grants from your community. Maybe you can even go further, like maybe certain groups that oppose housing don't get housing, don't get gambling grants, right? Like, you could go really a long way down the pathway. And I'm not suggesting to do that, but it's cities and municipalities. The red tape is ridiculous. The length of time it takes, all of those things get transferred to the bottom line for the person who finally has to stroke the deposit check and take out the big mortgage.
Yeah, because exactly the Corey Hogan quote you tweeted, or sorry, the Corey Hogan tweet you quoted. That's better. There's a corollary to that, which is everyone says we need more housing and more dense housing and all this stuff, but not across the street. No, well, that's different. This street has character that must be preserved. I mean, somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you seen this story in local media across BC? It's literally daily.
Totally. I mean, I can give you one from Langley Township. There's been this empty parking lot between two condo buildings of about 4 stories each. It's been empty for 20 years, this parking lot. And guess what? Someone bought it and said, hey, let's develop apartment buildings that are going to be the same height as these other two buildings, but because the way rules have changed as far as building heights go, we can actually get a 5th floor and still be the same height. Great, more housing. Guess what happened at the public hearing? One person gets there and is like, you're going to take away views and crime and because some of them might be rental. That attracts a certain kind of people to a neighborhood. And you're like, oh my God, like should be a slam dunk. And it got deferred. There's a building at 200th Street in Langley, the interchange. No one lives near it. No one. It is a freeway interchange, and the people who live closest to it live in Surrey, and who cares about them when you're a Langley councillor? It got 0 responses from the public at the public hearing. 0. Not a letter, not an email, nothing. What did council do? Did they stick up their hands? Like, I would have stuck my hand up so fast for that building. Like, yes, good, finally, something everyone agrees on, let's do it. No, this council sat back and said, you know what we should do? We should defer this and go back to the public and find someone to complain about it. They stopped everything and demanded more public input because clearly something was wrong if no one was complaining. No, it's just the fact that people realize that's the perfect place for this kind of density. Smarten up. Councils like this drive me crazy. Now you've got me on a Langley kick, Maclean, and there's no coming down from that. So there you go. I'm throwing my pen down in disgust at that council.
Wow. That's what that sound was, if you're listening, and most of you are, according to the numbers. So yes, Jordan angrily slamming down his pen.
I was having a good day, and then Maclean got me all wound up about red tape at City Hall, and now here we are.
Look at what I did. I'm such a stinker. We should also, we talked about the Liberals' announcement this morning. We're now a week into this election campaign, and we talked about this on Political Capital on Friday. And I was kind of surprised that my fellow panelists didn't see the first week the same way I did, which was that, look, the story to me is that the Conservatives seem to be outperforming expectations, and the polls are confirming this. They're ahead in Ontario. That's a big deal. Now, where they're ahead in terms geographically is very, very, very important, because the Conservatives' vote is not as efficient as the Liberals' vote. Mm-hmm. So they can, Andrew Scheer won more votes than Justin Trudeau. He's no longer, he's not the Prime Minister. I don't know if you noticed that. But that said, the Liberals are trying very hard to make Aaron O'Toole look like he's scary and has a secret agenda. And so far, at least, Jordan, it does not appear that is sticking.
You're correct. Andrew Scheer is not the leader after winning more votes. 2017 Christy Clark and 2005 Gordon Campbell could not be reached for comment. You're right. It's an interesting thing, right? The general feeling about O'Toole going into this campaign, I think, was no one knows him and the people who do hate him.
Yeah.
And what that does is it lowers the expectation so low that if O'Toole shows up, what's the old saying, wearing pants, all of a sudden he's exceeded expectations. I think he has. I've been really impressed with him when he's been interacting with people in groups. The kind of studio town hall stuff, I think, falls flat for any leader. Compared to actually seeing the kind of energy they get from people. I think that's been good. I think the Afghanistan issue is a perfect one for Aaron O'Toole to talk about, because the contrast between him and all the other leaders on this is so different. Justin Trudeau was wearing blackface at fancy private school events, and Aaron O'Toole was serving his country in the military. Like, that is a heck of a contrast, right? And it gives him a credibility to speak on that issue, even with the jaded media hordes. They're like, okay, we should probably listen because this guy did put his ass on the line in a way that no one else did.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. So I think he has exceeded the expectations. Now I look at the numbers, the poll numbers today, and I think it's 34 Conservative, 33 Conservative, 32 Liberal. Basically, it's exactly the same as 2019, which is a problem for Mr. Trudeau, because clearly people aren't rallying to his side here and racing to give him a majority. The jury's still out, and the longer kind of that underdog O'Toole hangs around, dodges the weird healthcare thing, dodges, whatever crazy abortion accusations get thrown at him by the Liberals, the more of those kind of, usual Liberal traps that he avoids, the stronger he gets. And we're heading into a debate season where I think Aaron O'Toole is going to perform pretty well, especially in French. Apparently his French is excellent. That, Trudeau has not sealed this deal the way that I think he thought he would have by now.
No, and 2 points I want to make there. The first is that Do you remember last year, there was a video that Aaron O'Toole, I think himself, put out, and it was him walking by the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa and making some terrible joke about, because there was a porta potty outside, and he made some joke about, you know the one I mean.
Yeah.
There's going to be Justin Trudeau's new office, and he had this terrible laughing at his own joke laugh. And I remember seeing that video and just thinking, oh no, like this is going to be a cakewalk for the Liberals. I mean, if this is Aaron O'Toole, then yeah. But I mean, so I think your point about, if your expectations are down here, then showing up with your pants on is fair. Now, but that said, Aaron O'Toole's actually done quite well. I think even I was seeing some NDP tweeters saying the Conservatives have the best housing plan. How is that possible?
Yeah.
And they took it as sort of a damning indictment of Trudeau and Singh, which is fair. But coming out in favor of safe injection sites and things like that. It's only a weekend, and we'll see what happens. The second point I would make is that let's not forget the reason we're here. If the last election was 4 years ago, and if Justin Trudeau wins again and it's another minority government, sure, fine. We're back in government. We face the electorate, whatever, it's status quo. They forced this election 2 years in. If they don't win a majority and they have another wobbly minority, there are going to be some people looking at Justin Trudeau with a bit of a side eye. Like, why did we just go through all that?
Yep.
This is... Yeah, so we'll see. Again, there's 3 weeks left, and a lot can happen. We haven't even had the debates yet, so we'll see. But to me, that was the takeaway from the first week, was that Aaron O'Toole having a very, very good week, Jagmeet Singh having a very good week, Justin Trudeau not so much, and Annamie Paul, I struggle to find news about her, to be totally honest. And I do look every single morning, and it's tough.
Yeah, okay. Who cares about the Greens? They're irrelevant on this stage. I mean, the one thing I would say as well for O'Toole is this. The PPC right now, I think it's depending on the poll, between 3% and 7% of the vote.
Yeah.
They're not going to have credible candidates across the country in a lot of spots. And you talk about inefficient vote. The PPC seems to me to be very much cut out to have an inefficient vote.
Yes.
So you do wonder if a point or two of that suddenly finds its way back to O'Toole, again, gets pretty darn interesting. So
yeah, actually a really good point. Yeah. And I saw that being debated elsewhere today. But fringe votes tend to be soft, is the best way of putting it. There are a lot of people, I say a lot of people, who will say, I'm disenchanted with the Conservatives, so I'm going to vote for the PPC. Or in BC, they might say I'm going to vote for the BC Conservatives. But then push comes to shove at the ballot box, and the numbers show that most of those who say they're going to vote for the fringe party don't.
Yeah.
And there are, you can speculate as to the reasons why, but there's no reason to expect that this election will be any different.
Well, I just got to figure that if you're a PPC person, the person you hate more than anyone else isn't Aaron O'Toole, it's Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
And if you had a chance to get rid of him by shifting your vote, holding your nose and voting once Conservative, wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. I think a lot of those PPC votes, you talked about inefficient votes, some of them are going to come in absolute no-hope ridings for the Liberals or NDP in places like Alberta. And, a bit like the Greens, a massive chunk of the votes they do get will be for one person. So we'll see what happens.
Yes. Can we talk about the BC Liberal leadership race?
Yes, we should, because that is our weekly segment. And there's a change in dates that has been announced.
Yes. The first debate, I think, was set for September 8th, which was inconvenient for you as you're moving.
Yes.
But thankfully, conveniently for you, inconveniently for the rest of the province, because the reason why is terrible and heartbreaking. Wildfire season, it's gotten a little better. It is by no means all the way better. There's still, I think, 60 communities under evacuation alert. God only knows how long until Lytton and Logan Lake will have residents living full-time there again. There's a lot going on. The Liberals, I think quite rightly, considering where their support is strongest, have moved from their debate from early September to late September. I think that makes very good sense. There was no need to rush it.
No.
Let's make sure we're focusing on the most important thing, which is helping those folks. And for a lot of BC Liberal MLAs, this has been one of their busiest summers ever, because they've been busy helping case by case by case folks who have lost everything or are in danger of losing everything in these fires. So we should actually say, like, a shout out to the unsung heroes, the MLAs, and frankly, more importantly, no offense MLAs, the constituency assistants who have been out there working every single day to try to help folks make it through these firestorms. But the bright side of this is, Maclean and I have been talking about maybe we'll do like a debate pregame show and postgame show. There you go, because we're nerds and we're going to watch it anyways, so we might as well talk about it with all of you after the fact.
And if you're watching this now, then chances are you like watching us. So hopefully you'll be interested. And that was all jeopardized by the fact that I'll be moving on the 8th. And you're quite right. I mean, this is not a 4-week election. There's no reason to, well, not rush, but keep that date. It's the end of September is just fine. Yeah. And speaking of the wildfires, I want to.
Wait. I have one more thing about BC Liberal News. One more piece of BC Liberal News.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Go for it.
I went. I had a drink with one of the BC Liberal leadership. And then I know what you're going to bridge back to, and that's a great topic too. But I had a drink with Renee Merrifield, was down last week in Vancouver meeting folks, and kindly invited me to have a drink. I was, now normally I'm a Langley person, don't like going to downtown Vancouver, but I was doing a wedding rehearsal there and it tied in perfectly. I gotta say, it was my first time meeting Renee in person. I was super impressed. She was interesting, she was engaged, she was up on her files. She had a authenticity and a humility to her about oh yeah, I know I screwed that up at the beginning, and boy, did I learn a lesson there. But most importantly, Maclean, and as you and I have dealt with many a politician in our livelihoods and careers, she had the rare gift where I bet you she listened twice as much as she talked. She asked open-ended questions, seemed, I'll take her at face value, seemed interested in my opinion on certain things. God only knows why. She could get it here for free anyways. But, it was a very different conversation than I've often had with politicians where maybe it's been more about, more about them and their challenges, what they're facing, blah, blah, blah. It was a very interesting conversation that way. I found that very, very engaging and very different from a lot of politicians I've met.
That's an interesting observation, and I too have had a coffee walk and talk with Renee Merrifield, and I kind of had the same impression. It is not uncommon for rookie politicians, and that's what she is, to be better in person because they will have spent their entire lives being good in person and having people tell them, you should run because you're really good. Yeah. But those skills are the skills that you need to be a politician in terms of, in front of the media and not stumbling like I just did when you want to make a point. Those are things you need to learn. And so it is it is not at all unusual to meet a rookie politician who is much more impressive in person when you might have only seen them on, the clip of them saying the wrong thing in question period or something like that. I mean, those things happen to absolutely everyone, including the veterans. And so, yeah, it's an interesting observation you made.
Yeah. So anyways, thanks to Renee for that. And I look forward to seeing her again, meeting her again. And if you're another Leadership Canada out there, you want to have a drink with Jordan, Jordan at icba.ca, happy to sit down and chat.
There's a separate YouTube series. And
I'm also a member. So my vote's up for grabs.
There you go. That's actually both the wildfires and the BC Liberal leadership race are good bridges into what I think is going to be the last thing we talk about today. And that is a frankly extraordinary piece that I was very proud to publish over the weekend from our very own Daniel Marshall, who, if you don't know, is an award-winning historian of all things BC and just like a fascinating guy. And most of his work has been centered around the Fraser Canyon, and so he has, deep contacts there, very good friends, and he lives quite near me here in Victoria. He decided to go over last weekend to Merritt and Lytton and places like that to see some friends, and he wrote about it. Literally running from the fires as he went. And I cannot recommend this piece highly enough. It's a real page turner, maybe a thumb scroller on your phone. And and it ended up with him literally just happening to run into Ellis Ross, and someone he had known but didn't know much about, and was very impressed with him. And not just because he spoke well, but because he was there talking to these people. Yeah.
No, you're exactly right. Like I didn't know the piece was coming. I hadn't heard about it, and saw it, clicked on it, and was sort of, sometimes you go in and out of pieces quick. That one sucked me in. I was like, wow. And then all of a sudden, Ellis Ross is there. And this, frankly, if I was the Ellis Ross campaign, iconic photo that I would be putting everywhere, which is Ellis talking in front of a burned out car and building, I presume in Lytton. That to me was one of the starkest images I've seen from this fire. And you have Ellis right there. And clearly made an impression on Daniel, who's not an easy guy to impress or woo. Daniel is a very personable guy, but Daniel's not the kind of guy to blow smoke for sure.
No.
You're right. Like, stop everything. Go to theorca.ca. Read this piece by Daniel Marshall. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, and I don't think Daniel would mind me sharing this. He was a little, I don't want to say nervous, but normally when he writes pieces for us, it's it's history. I don't want to say safe, but that's his stock in trade. And he called and asked, would it be okay if he went out to he really wanted to see some old friends who had been evacuated and see some of the sites that had been affected by the fires. It was really important to him. Would it be okay if he wrote about it? And would I be interested? And I'm like, Daniel, of course. Yes. Yeah. And then, he sends it and he's still a little nervous, like, oh, I'm about to send it to you, old chap, but, have a good look at it and tell me what you think. And then you read it and it's just, Daniel, this is spellbinding. This is fantastic. Yeah. Do it again.
Yeah. Well, and from the point of view of a guy who loves that area so much, has invested so much in the history of that area, and now here we have a historically catastrophic event that has hit it. Was there a Daniel Marshall who visited Pompeii after? That is the kind of view of this, right? Like, he had an investment in that area that is pretty amazing. Like, honestly, the Orca, like, Maclean, you should get together and do like a Daniel Marshall walk or a history event somewhere in one of these towns, basically where you and I can go with them, but other people, if they want to pay and come along, where he takes us through some of this, some of the history there, because I would just find that incredibly fascinating. And there's no one in BC. There's lots of great historians in BC. There's lots of great writers in BC. Daniel is that rare mix between the two. Yeah. And his pieces, I love them. I never miss a Daniel Marshall piece on the Orca.
I can't wait to the next one. I don't know when that'll be, but I hope it'll be soon. Another marathon edition this week. There's just so much going on. And Jillian, you got through the entire episode without us scaring you off with a sports reference, other than Dr. Bonnie Henry at a Lions game, but that doesn't count, damn it. Yeah. So until next week, which hopefully will not be as busy as this week, he's Jordan Bateman. I'm Maclean K. It's not a Pokemon unboxing video, but nevertheless, happy politics.